Hey, hey,
What up?
hey.
What up? Hey, man, what's going on, brother?
Nothing much. Glad to be back.
Yeah, yeah,
Been a
man, yeah, man. There's been a lot going on in these
minute.
YouTube streets,
Man.
all types of crazy stuff, tariffs, freaking people getting deported, and
Yeah, man, oh man.
bond
Man,
market
oh
going
man.
crazy.
Yo.
Just you name it, man.
Is this the
Emperor.
beginning of the end, bro?
Yeah, bro, that's what I feel. I've been kind of on that tip for a while. I just think it's becoming more and more apparent that
Hey, well,
the American empire has no clothes.
not
Has no
not
clothes, bro.
not to toot my own horn, but y'all can I can't remember what episode it was, but y'all can go
Mhm.
and see Conspiracy Brother told y'all to buy chickens and rabbits years ago. I told y'all to buy chickens and rabbits because y'all was gonna need them eggs.
Yeah, yeah,
Y'all was
man.
acting all like it probably was the Ukraine video because I feel like that
Mhm.
one we BB in the comments, she was mad at me, dog, for talking about
Yeah,
Ukraine. Like, why would you be concerned? And it
right.
is a wonderful situation to have. What's I guess it'd be what 4 years of
Mhm.
hindsight, 3 years of
Right,
hindsight.
right, right,
You know,
right.
so yeah, but it's what was the last show we did was looking at the situation in Syria
Hmm.
with your guy Al Jalani,
You're right,
and
exactly. Hmm.
what an interesting turn of events, you know. Because I can't remember if we said on that if we said on the episode, but isn't it always interesting? Like
Yeah,
you
who's our
never,
enemies, and then enemies become friends, and back enemies,
yeah,
and back friends. Yeah,
and
it's all a shell game.
and isn't it interesting though that these like so-called Islamic terrorist groups and
Hmm.
terrorist cells they never
Attack
attack
Israel.
Israel,
Right, right.
like of all like they attack each other incessantly, other
Hmm.
Muslims or whatever,
Yeah, other
other
sects. You know what I
yeah, other
mean? Yeah.
sects of Islam,
Right, right, right,
or
right,
Christians or whatever.
right.
But
Yeah.
they're never just like, you know what, let's just go to Israel right quick and just see what can happen. So
Right.
that's always interesting to me. Even, when you look at Al Jalani and the
Hmm.
way that he allowed Israel to take over the Golden Heights, which is,
Hmm.
why he even named himself that. That wasn't his
Right.
birth
That's where he's
name.
from. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But he just let
Right.
them, you know, like Rick James and that Dave Chappelle skit stomp in with his muddy shoes and dig in his couch, all in this ancestral territory. So,
Right,
you know,
man.
but
Right.
but yeah, man. So
Yeah,
since you kind
them
of
folks will be coming up pretty soon in our talks, man. They everywhere and everything.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But so I'm gonna let you kind of take control since this was you had the topic, you had the title, you really had everything. All I did was come up with a thumbnail, and you gave me the idea for that. So I'm gonna let you
Yeah.
kind of take control about it, kind of steer the conversation wherever you want to go. But
Yeah. Let
yeah,
me share
let me see.
screen.
All right.
All right. Too much. Gotta share screen. Gotta make sure entire screen. Gotta pick the screen I want to share. Gotta make sure I share the audio. That's always a kid. Also share audio system. All right, share. Let me know when you can see. All right. So we're gonna first start off with really, so the whole like gist of this episode is really just kind of, all about America's all the things that America has fancied itself to be, in this day and the day of, as we sit here, the 16th of April, 2025, like the whole world, is laid bare for the whole world to see that America is a fraud. America, those, especially those in the power structure, regardless of what party structure or what party, political party system they belong to, is all a sham. And ultimately, with this day of information, a lot of stuff that we've all kind of like, especially in the freedom community, have always suspected, is actually being exposed. For lack of just time, I could, go into, the revelations of how, Israel was involved in the assassination of JFK. Here in this story, you'll be seeing various members of the Italian mob and the Jewish mob, and also, Israeli intelligence, them working for Israeli intelligence behind the scenes of, the quote unquote Epstein / P. Diddy situation, where these people, were pushed upon the scene, but they weren't pushed upon the scene by themselves, right? There's something nefarious behind them, how they came into power, how they came into, the public eye, a lot of mysterious cabal of people, and which, again, we've all suspected, but we just didn't have like names. We've all suspected that, especially where we saw that there was a turn, especially in the 90s, right? There was an overemphasis, hip hop. It was, started off as kind of like something, for freedmen to, to party and to, as a form of expression. It was very Afrocentric. I remember groups De La Soul, Brand Nubian, there was, towards the late 90s, these groups were very popular. And then you just started seeing a shift, with the advent of NWA, but it just became like, we went through, gangster culture was being promoted, so on and so forth, violence, this and so on and so forth. Not to say that it was never there, but it just got pushed to the spotlight. And so there was an article done by lady Whitney Webb, and it's going to be at least a 3-part series. This is the first part of the series that delves into the connections between Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, Sean, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Diddy Combs, and their ties to, influential gangsters, crime, mob families, as well as influential high up Jewish people in MCA, and then their ties to the Israeli intelligence, right? And there's a direct connection also to them influencing music, because to actually create, to help create the the school to prison pipeline, right? Through the culture, right? And she gives some really very very key connections. This guy here, the man to the far left, he was associated with a protege of Meyer Lansky, and he's sitting here in this group, in this picture that was taken amongst all three of them. This isn't a composite, or this is actually was a real photo. So let's begin. Let's kind of go with it. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article because it's very long. This is like a 70-minute worth read, according to the website this is posted on, and there's a lot of people covering it. But so we'll go on and just go on and say one of the things. So we all know that. Well, I won't say we all know. But, for those who don't know, Sean Combs first kind of got his start at Uptown Records, which was founded by Andre Harrell, who's the guy to his right, our left. Okay, Andre Harrell, had got his start, some of his start with Def Jam, and but more importantly, Uptown Records had a distribution deal through MCA. So we're going to kind of focus on MCA real quick, and let me see. So his success to Uptown success, Andre Harrell, MCA. So prior to his mentorship of Sean Combs, Uptown's Andre Harrell broke into the nascent hip hop scene by way of a rap duo named Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, which he and a friend had formed in high school. He drew out of college in '83 to focus his career as an account executive selling airtime with New York all news AM station WINS. WINS was previously owned by radio pioneer J. Elroy McCraw. I brought this person in. This guy used to work for the CIA. So isn't that funny?
Hey.
A CIA,
tinfoil Koofy time already, eh?
Right, exactly. You know what I'm saying? And
I feel like I have said on this show before, it's always the CIA at the bottom of all this stuff, but
right. CIA intelligence, yeah, no doubt. McCraw was an ex-OSS agent, which was the precursor to the CIA. Was a member of the advisory council of the U.S. National Security Council. McCraw hired trailblazing dick jockey Alan Freed to man the mic at the station, a deal that was brokered by record executive Morris Levy. All right. Per Patosh, a U.S. assistant attorney, later claimed that Levy's jazz label, Roulette Records, boosted by his relationship with WINS Alan Freed, the most popular DJ in the country in the 1950s and 60s, was a way station for heroin trafficking. Levy and Roulette were also linked to organized crime, specifically the Genovese crime family. Levy was notably the main financier behind the first hip-hop record group, Sugar Hill. So already here, you know what I'm saying? One of the first records that we knew, that came out of Sugar Hill was the hippie to the hip hopping and don't stop the rocking to the bam bam boogie, right? That literally was that was in 1979, the year of my birth, right? Freaking and it was one of the first, A Rapper's Delight. That was the name of the song. Literally one of the first radio hip hop hits. Hip hop has been they say 1973 was the start of it, but this is in 79. And again, one of the first radio play hip hop songs, Rapper's Delight, again, was associated with the Genovese crime family and this guy Levy. Do I have his picture? I don't think I do. I didn't put his up, but this was out. Oh, so anyway, so we'll keep on going. The Zen of the Free celebrity was exemplified by Paramount Pictures hiring him at the rate of $29,000 per day to make a teen movie in 1957. Imagine that, bro. $29,000 a day is a lot of money today, let alone, what I'm saying, back in 1957.
That was more than people was making the whole year.
Beyond, way more than a year, bro. 2, 3, 4 years combined. You know what I'm saying? Back in the 50s, right?
You probably was lucky to make like $5,000 a year.
Right, exactly. You know what I'm saying? Shortly thereafter, Freed was targeted by a smear campaign, resulting in him unceremoniously and explicitly fired by McCraw in 1958. Freed was singled out by Orrin Hatch. That lets you know how Orrin Hatch, the old ass. I think, is he still
Orrin Hatch? Think he died, but man, he was old.
He was old, right? Old. Right, I remember being a senator, bro. Congressional committee during the first payola scandal involving the bribing of radio stations and his return for single plays. So this was the guy. Right. So
this is a long time ago.
Yeah, this is Freed. You know what I mean? This is Alan Freed, right?
Like a young Bob Hope.
Right. Right. You know what I'm saying? Let's go back to the article.
Yeah, when you talking about payola, like that's what do they call that? Body bang bang bang. What do they call it? That's like
bebop and
jukebox days.
Yeah, again the 50s. But anyways, the mob has always been associated with music. Have always, you know what I'm saying? That and Jewish people, right? And them exploiting black bodies and black talent. You know what I mean? That's always been ongoing. So that's why there's no confusion or mystery behind, the peoples that later on that Andre Harrell would be ended up, connected to, as well as, Sean, Sean Combs or Diddy.
and I want to interject just because this is a Whitney Webb article.
Mm-hmm.
She actually has like 2 or 3 books. It's
Yes.
in like volumes
Mm-hmm.
called The United States of Blackmail, if I'm not mistaken. And she
Yeah, you're right.
discusses like going back to the FBI, how J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed because I guess either he was into cross-dressing or he was in like a homosexual relationship with one of his assistants.
Mm-hmm.
And the mob had dirt on him, which is why, you know, the FBI rarely went after the mob, if ever, you know, for any of the crimes they were committing. So, I mean, you know, there details all types of high-ranking government officials who were involved in pedophilia and things like that. So, I mean, just keeping in line with what you're talking about makes total sense that in the music industry, if in politics, you find these backdoor, you know, controllers who really manage the whole process and the whole system. So I'll let you keep going. I'm sorry to interject.
Yeah, no worries. So months after joining Win, so this was the radio station. That radio station had that history, right? You know, obviously he, you know, decades later, he would be associated with this radio station. But you know, again, even back in the, you know, I'm saying in the 80s or whatever, this mob connection was still apparent, right? This mob quote unquote intelligence connection was still apparent. So here's this good talks about how Harrell Jasper Prospect experienced a dramatic upswing when he met Russell Simmons, co-founder of Def Jam record label, who would later become very close to Sean Combs. Simmons offered Harrell a job at Def Jam within 2 short years, a rapid ascent mirroring Combs' own, right? You know, so before there was Combs, there was Andre Harrell. So we'll just go ahead. I think, you know, there's enough public knowledge about that. But let's talk about the deal. He ends up getting a deal with MCA, and that kind of what, really propelled Uptown, so to speak. So now, like Def Jam, Uptown's early success and furtherance of Pharrell's career in industry was due to its distribution deal with a major entertainment conglomerate. In Uptown's case, the company in question was Music Corporation of America, MCA, entertainment giant that dominated the American music and movie industry for many decades. Uptown's early distribution deal with MCA began in '87 and soon expanded into a formal partnership with the company a year later in '88. Bro, I was 8 going on 9 in '88. Yeah, their ties grew even deeper in '92 when MCA offered Uptown a $50 million deal, whereupon Uptown expanded into film and television. Blah blah blah. This is an incident where it talks about how Andre Harrell had a gun or he got smacked by somebody at an event or what have you, at a conference, and he, you know, got some thugs or whatever involved. But anyways, let me go down here. MCA. Okay, now we're gonna skip to that. In addition to being critical to Harrell's career, MCA's success, Uptown's relationship with MCA also appears to align with one of Combs' earliest sex crimes. Okay, I'm not going to really focus on all of that. I really want to focus on MCA as, okay, here we go. MCA, Mob Corporation of America. So in the article that kind of talks about MCA, his affiliation with MCA, but obviously MCA was in existence prior to Uptown Records. So what about MCA, right? While MCA undoubtedly dominated much of American entertainment for decades, it was also deeply connected to organized crime and political power. In terms of MCA's political power, this arguably peaked under the Reagan administration, which boasted extremely close ties to the company. MCA even played a role in covert operations that brought together organized crime interests and intelligence agencies during this period. The most iconic executive in MCA's history was Lew Wasserman. All right, so he's a key person in all of this. Him and his ties would, you know, bring in Epstein, Clive Davis. You know what I'm saying? His protege. Go ahead.
I was just listening to something about Clive Davis. They were saying dude was like a real monster.
Yeah,
Arista.
He formed Arista, but he was with he was with CBS prior to that. But we're gonna go on to this.
Yeah.
That's what this article kind of like establishes the background players, right? So Lou Wasserman, this is a picture of who Lou Wasserman was right here. This was Lou. He was the most iconic, you know what I'm saying, executive of MCA, you know, of the company's history, right? He'll be, you know, the Henry Ford or Henry Ford Deuce, you know what I'm saying, of the Ford Motor Company, or, you know, or the Steve Jobs of Apple, right? You know what I mean, to give a comparison, since, you know, pretty much, you know, this was way back in the day, right? Most of us weren't even born, or barely were born when this guy even, you know, probably even passed away. The most kind of the most kind of executive, Lou Wasserman, joined the company in 1936. That point, Wasserman had established long-standing close ties to the Jewish mobster and the Meyer Lansky. This keeps coming up. Meyer Lansky associate Mo Dalitz. So this is a picture of Mo Dalitz. He was one of Meyer Lansky's proteges, and was part of his influence. Meyer Lansky, if anybody doesn't know, Meyer Lansky was considered the accountant to the mob, right? He was a Jewish gangster. But anyways, we'll go into him later on. But I remember seeing something in reference Meyer Lansky, his influence, especially when it comes to, he was one of the first people that I ever heard of. Not to say he was the first to do it, but he was noted as being one of the first, you know what I'm saying, mobs to really use sexual exploitation, you know what I mean, like, you know, use blackmail, right, against known figures. That was something that was kind of cultivated in the Jewish mob, right? And this will later, you know, obviously the ties to what will later be, you know, Combs and so on and so forth, you know, using that tactic, right? It was used allegedly in this article, was used against him and by those above him, and obviously he chose to incorporate that tactic later on, or he's being accused of incorporating that tactic. Anyways, Mo Dalitz, having alleged initiated those ties by first served as a publicist for Dalitz control Mayfair Casino. However, some sources contend that Wasserman had joined Dalitz Mayfield Road Gang before working at the Mayfair. Wasserman later married the daughter of Dalitz longtime lawyer Henry Beckerman, who he had first met through his work at the casino. All right. Wasserman and MCA were also forces chiefly responsible for the political career of former President Ronald Reagan. Reagan, previously an actor before becoming a politician, had been represented by MCA in 1940. Soon after, he became Wasserman's first $1 million client. Wasserman later engineered Reagan's campaign to lead the Screen Actors Guild, where Reagan made significant policy changes designed to give MCA an edge over other entertainment companies. Wasserman and other top MCA executives such as Tab Schreiber, Jules Steen, you all know what these names are, played an intimate role in Reagan's.
Tell us.
Yeah, we all know them folks. Them folks. And it's, you know, and it's crazy, bro. You know, let's break, you know what I mean? Like, they are what they are. They've done what they've done. They created Hollywood. They created this political influence. They created the financial, you know, influence, right? But then when you say, hey, you know what I'm saying? Even like, who got in trouble recently? I can't remember. Somebody got in trouble for I want to, was it Shannon Sharp or something? Somebody got in trouble by just saying like, hey, you know, we really you know, admire the fact that you all, you know, do what you do. And it was like, oh, that's anti-Semitism. Like,
it might have been Shannon Sharp. Yeah, might have been Shannon Sharp.
It was actually like something, you know, like, hey, I'm kind of, you know, impressed by the fact that you guys do that, and then somehow that was considered, you know, being anti-Semitic by saying, you know, what they are and what they do. Yeah, that's the crazy part about it, man. It's just that's just wild to me.
So it's interesting. You know, what's his name? Professor. I don't know if he prefers to go by Professor actually, but he was on the Jimmy Dore show recently. He was getting interviewed. Man, I don't know why. I was just saying his name, And now I'm blanking on. I'm gonna tell you what it is because you'll know who it is after I tell you. But he actually was doing a breakdown on this. It was what's his name? I'll tell you. Oh my goodness, Norman Finkelstein. You know, he's a prominent anti-Israeli apartheid activist, like historian, professor, and all this stuff. And his parents were actually, or if not his parents, it might have been his parents too. But like he had a whole lot of family members who were in concentration camps, and so he talks about like how that upbringing and his mother and father really teaching him like this never should be done again to anybody, has kind of motivated his activism and calling out like the Israeli state. But he actually had a little like he was on Jimmy Dore and he was talking about how the Druze have control Hollywood, or they used to. He says used to, but he probably says that more or less.
They created it.
Because he says like it's been over 200 Holocaust movies since 1980.
Right.
He talks about what else does he say? Because it was something you just brought up. But yeah, like you have this situation. This is why it's always a tough one for me, even as a a descendant of freedmen. Let's say I was politically ambivalent to the Israel-Palestine situation. As a descendant of freedmen or descendant of slaves, however you want to look at it in this country, like you find it's more in conservative Jewish circles, right, where they are anti-reparations or they're like very pro bootstrapper. You find like in the Ben Shapiro circles and stuff, and it's like not only have you gotten reparations from all these other countries, historically, but our government continues to pay all types of maintenance fees and military protection fees for your country, and all this stuff.
Wars on behalf of your interests. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you essentially have an opportunity to create propaganda to garner support for your. Imagine if you had 200 movies since 1980 about slavery, about the horrific treatment that Black Americans suffered in this country. Oh, I remember what it was. He said he was talking about how like Jewish, like Bugsy Siegel essentially built Vegas,
right?
Like, and a lot of the Jewish mobsters are responsible, like you said, for Hollywood and becoming what it was. But they didn't, because they controlled Hollywood. They didn't like to be portrayed in movies and stuff that way. So it was fine, like to do The Godfather, have Italians being shown as being like violent murderers and criminals, or even now where you'll see these mob shows and they're all Italian. When really the Jews or the Jewish mafia had as much of a hand, if not a greater hand, in the same kind of activity. And so, I mean, I would encourage everybody to go check that episode out.
I mean, Murder Inc. was a Jewish gang. They were assassins for hire. The purple gang here in Detroit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Jewish mob. You know what I'm saying? Like they were just as much as any other. You know what I'm saying? Immigrant group. European immigrant group that came in here. They were. Yeah, exactly. But I feel what you're saying. But anyway, let's go on this MCA. So here he goes. It talks about how when Reagan was president, his AG squashed what had been an ongoing investigation to MCA's or organized crime ties. All right. So they had that power, man. You know what I mean?
And I'm sorry to keep interjecting, but just I feel like statements like that just amplify the deep levels of corruption within the U.S. government and how far they go back. Like, we're gonna kind of get into some of the Trump stuff later, but like, Trump is not new. I think Reagan is a monster. I've joked and said to people, I think he's probably, him and George Bush are the most evil presidents we've had in the time of in the age of color TV. You know what I'm saying? I think, I personally, I like to separate all presidents between those who own people and those who did not. So among presidents who did not own people, I will put Ronald Reagan near the top. Woodrow Wilson, Ronald Reagan, George Bush are among my top. For Andrew Johnson, are among my top for presidents who didn't own people, right? Of worst, top worst among presidents who didn't own people. And so, this is the kind of context that I think is lost a lot when we do a lot of this pearl clutching, because, if a Reagan supporter, like Obama said, he would in the 80s, he would have been a Reagan Democrat or whatever. When people who support Ronald Reagan or that idea, conservatives especially, but anybody, when you can retrospectively try to clean up his image in any way, what that shows is you don't have a principle to stand on, because he was an evil man. Even if we take off the drugs and the Iran-Contra situation, the drug smuggling in the Black community, ramping up the war on drugs, really destabilizing. Just look at the corrupt stuff that he did. If you just take race out of it, he was a terrible president.
Right.
He was a terrible governor. The policies that he put forward are largely responsible. Some of them are a continuation of who doesn't get enough credit, Carter. Some of them are a continuation of Carter. But he really amplified the corporate capture of our country, the offshoring of jobs, the destabilization of the middle class and the working class in this country in a way that I don't think gets enough credit. And so, Trump is, you could say Trump is bad, but without the context that this is a cycle of American abuse and corruption, you'll never correct anything. And this is why reparations is such a hard battle to win, because you can't even get this country to recognize it has anything to need to repair.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They think Trump is the worst thing that ever happened. And he's only been the president now, for 5 years.
Right.
9 consecutive terms. You know what I'm saying? Like, you think this is as bad as it's gotten?
Right. Not even 5 years, right? We only three months into his presidency.
Well, not even a full 100 days yet.
Right.
This is the worst president we ever had. You know what I'm saying? Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, Reagan set up the layup, man. He did the alley-oop, you know what I mean? And Bush and all of them, and the Clintons too, man. Like you said, all of them, bro. Like, that's the thing. They, and we're gonna get into that later on. We're gonna get into that definitely later on when we cover, like, some of the stuff with Richard Wolff and the trade war and all of that. It's really the system is the problem at the end of the day. But anyway, so it goes on to say how this guy, ties and connections, to different executives at MCA who had ties with the mob or what have you. Okay, this is another pivotal guy, this Waxner guy, Leslie Waxner, because he's gonna tie to a lot of
Leslie Waxner. That's he graduated from Ohio State. He's like a big time Ohio State donor, if I'm not mistaken.
Is he?
I think he started Victoria's Secret.
Yeah. Victoria's Secret. And he was Waxner. So here we go. So the Shutter blah 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 blah. It says the federal investigation MCA also turned up evidence the company had ties to the Genovese crime family. As noted earlier, the Genovese crime family had also been linked to Morris Levy. Levy was also involved with some of Pacello's dealings. We kind of skipped over Pacello, but either or, you know what I'm saying? These were executives and people that were linked to the mob. In addition, during this same period, the mob-style murder of retail billionaire Leslie Wexner's then tax attorney Arthur Shapiro led Columbus police investigators to link both Shapiro's death and Waxner himself to Genovese criminal interests. Shortly after Shapiro's death, Jeffrey Epstein entered into Wexner's inner circle, tasked with getting Wexner's finances in order. MCA also has connections to significant yet largely forgotten scandal in the 1980s involving many of the same players of the Iran-Contra network, as well as figures like Robert Maxwell. The scandal was known as the, Promise software scandal. Saw operatives tied to U.S. and Israeli intelligence team up with organized crime elements to both steal and then repurpose Promise, a then revolutionary software product for data management, as a backdoor surveillance system that was marketed to other intelligence agencies, sensitive government research laboratories, and a litany of banks around the globe. One of MCA's top executives, Eugene, I don't even want to sounds like it's Ganatano, or anyways, who then led MCA's home entertainment division, was intimately involved in major aspects of the scandal and its illegal activities. Juan Quinto later took credit for the closure of the Department of Justice investigation into the MCA's mob ties. More specifically, MCA and Juan Quinto were connected to elements of the Promise scandal, based with mob link joint venture between the Cabazon Indian Reservation and the Wackenhut Corporation to develop weapons systems, some of which were intended for the CI-backed Nicaragua Contras. Journalist Danny Colasero, who died in connection with his efforts to expose the network ultimately behind the Promise scandal, had stated before his death that he was writing about a network he called the Octopus, which oddly enough was a long-standing nickname for the MCA, because I guess they have their tentacles in everything, right? Between 94 and 95, MCA was acquired by the Brofman family group, Seagrams. A few years later, the Brofmans also took control of Def Jam. The Brofmans, like MCA itself, has an extensive history of organized crime connections, which date back to the mob-brokered bootlegging of the American Prohibition in 1920s. Wasserman, a longtime associate of Edgar Brofman Sr., got a Seagram's board seat out of the deal and became chairman emeritus of the company. Edgar Brofman Jr. quickly bought on Hollywood power broker Michael Ovitz, who later became president of Disney and a Jeffrey Epstein associate. Brofman Jr. is also listed in Epstein's Black Book, and his father's alleged ties to Epstein's Bear Stearns career likely played a role in Epstein's ouster from the bank in 1981. Ovitz, at the time, teamed up with Brofman Jr., was close to Herbert Allen of the Allen and Company, a company whose ties to organized crime, as well as the aforementioned Promise scandal. The Brofmans, particular Edgar Brofman Jr., will feature prominently in part 2 of the series, when Brofman negotiated major deals with Combs in the early 2000s. So yeah, man, these cats. Let me see. MCA, they were Mob Corporation of America was a nickname of them. The Octopus. I'm gonna land on this. What talks about? Clive Davis. We'll come back. Mentors in Crime. This is a large article, man. It goes into a lot of details, but the part that I really would like to talk about is Westerman again. Obviously, he's with the Clintons, so two presidential, both. You know what I'm saying? It don't matter, Republican, Democrat. You know what I mean? These people have their tentacles in everybody because they're providing the money and the cooperation, right? They're getting major investigations, freaking turned away, because of their influence. Wackenhut, I remember that somewhere. Okay, I guess I will. Resident man. Okay, I think I gotta type in prison. So here, this is the part I really want to get to. So in part 1 of the series, we're examining the often overlooked early years. Okay. But his father was linked to the mob as well. His father was killed when he was 3, and it was alleged because of his they thought he was going to turn informant or what have you. The mob killed him. I don't know if it was Gambino or the Genovese family, but one of that. So it also explores a piece of the corporation behind the success of Combs' mentors and later Combs himself, namely the Music Corporation. Here's it. And Arista Records when taken together with other claims from that period, namely about efforts to manipulate hip-hop for the benefit of private prison industry in the early mid to 1990s. So let me see here. I think this is okay. Okay, so while speculative appears that various connections leading back to MCA and its influence can help us arrive at one unsettling possibility. During this period, not only was MCA a dominant force in entertainment and early hip hop specifically, but Lawrence Tisch, through his 1985 takeover of CBS, controlled another key branch of the music industry through 1995, with the Brofmans taking over MCA and later Def Jam and Warner Music. As will be noted in part 2, the influence of the so-called mega group billionaires over the music industry became extremely significant in the 1990s, with Combs teaming up with Clive Davis with significant ties to the same network to form his own label, Bad Boy, in 95. This tiny group of billionaires had the ability to shape hip-hop, the cultural engine of the African-American community in many ways. That same year, the Brofmans and Tisch clans formally joined forces with Leslie Wexner, who we talked about earlier, with his ties to Wasserman, right? And then Meyer Lansky. Others, like MCA, linked Steven Spielberg via the Mega Group. American record labels had allegedly begun to conspire to promote crime in hip-hop lyrics with the ostensible goal of facilitating the filling of private prisons, as those that ran the record labels were allegedly deeply connected to private prison firms. An account from an anonymous industry insider details how in 1991, he was invited to a clandestine meeting where he was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He recounted the events of that meeting as follows. Quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everyone else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who introduced himself by his first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised us all for the success we achieved in our industry and congratulated us for being selected as part of the small decision makers at this point. I began to feel slightly uncomfortable at the strangeness of this gathering. Subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the prospective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions in the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At that time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with us. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies that receive funding from government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we will be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken aback by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague, who had first opened the meeting, took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employers had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by marketing music that promotes criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy personal stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Yeah. So anyway, I'll leave it on that. Again, obviously this was taken under, we don't know the person's name, right? But it's not far-fetched to believe that this is true, especially when you start linking all the ties to, known ties and individuals to the mob, going back all the way back into the 30s, right? And just following the line bit by bit, person by person, connection to connection, right? You know what I mean? You have Wasserman, right? That's part of MCA. You have these different groups. Like you see as over time how it happened in the 90s when all these through the with Clinton allowing the merger between all of these different record companies, you know what I'm saying, movie outlet studios. I'm sorry.
With the Telecommunications Act.
Yeah, the Telecommunications Act's of 96, right?
Yeah, consolidate, yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? That allowed this, this meeting up, papers being owned by, studios, freaking channels, stations, you know what I mean? Like this had never been done before. This was purposely kept separated to make sure that there wouldn't be this, control over media that the way it is. And now it's gotten, to where it's pretty much like really like 3 or 4 major media companies, right? Over television, cable, you know what I'm saying? How it's made, how it's distributed, the whole nine, right? And you see all of this, and we've all theorized this. This is, people have been talking about this for years in our community, but it's really, I won't say it's cool, but it's good. It's good to see, like, okay, versus something being talked about, that's just some hotep stuff, to where like, okay, this is journalists doing multi series linking, showing the connections and the links, you know what I mean? And this is part of the, hey, we land, this is being laid Blair now, it's not just a speculation, and it hasn't been for years, going back to with the CIA involvement. Again, they referenced the freaking Iran-Contra affair, right? Like all this stuff was all simultaneously, and all these characters and all these people are simultaneously all involved. You know what I mean? And the stuff is coming out with JFK and Israel, right? And these intelligence, Israel's involvement. You know what I'm saying? I believe they're going to talk more about that in the upcoming series about the intelligence. This is a long article. Actually, no, they're actually talking about it now. We could be here for a long time. Yeah, they actually do talk about it. It's in this article. Yeah, it's a really good article. You should check it out. I haven't fully even read it. I've only skimmed it as much as I've even talked about it here, right? America is the chickens have come home to roost. The ugliness of us is laid bare for everyone to see, and so much so, like, the world is choosing to turn on us. You know what I'm saying? What happened with with the Iraqi war. You know what I mean? What's going on? With us supporting Israel and their total genocidal campaign against the Palestinians, and their further destruction they want to do to Iran. You know what I mean? Like it's clear, bro. You know what I'm saying? And we're becoming isolated. I know I've talked for a while, man. What's your views on this as I set up to kind of move us on to the next video?
Well, you know me, man. I got the tenfold coup. You ever heard already?
Yeah.
Because I mean, Jimmy Dore, I've heard say this a lot, but I'm sure he did not coin this idea. But it's whoever you can't criticize is who controls you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you look around at how the apparatus works, right? We know the CIA has had an office within Hollywood since like the 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know, like you said, the CIA, when they had the JFK files released, the only things they wanted redacted were mentions of Israel.
Right.
And so, like, we know JFK had an interest in having AIPAC made a foreign agency, a foreign lobbying agency, and not how they kind of loophole it being they're technically considered domestic because they're made of American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even with the music, like you said, we understand that shift in the promotion of violent music and destructive music and the ways and the impacts that it has on our community. We did a breakdown when we talked about COINTELPRO and looking at how the government brought guns and drugs into our neighborhoods, how they smuggled them up from Central and South America, right? Even when I think about it, you look at Frank Lucas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this, like this Robin Hood persona he's given because, man, he smuggled heroin into dead bodies coming back from Vietnam. And it's like, when you really think about that in your mind, if you just take a second and think about all the moving parts you'd have to have in place for that to happen, there's no way he was doing this without having intelligence really controlling the whole operation. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage to smuggle in heroin into dead bodies of military soldiers, and you didn't go over there to ensure that whole transition or any of that process? But you get so caught up in this, the flash, I would talk to my dad about the movie Scarface a lot, and even the movie Superfly. We would talk about that a lot, because he liked to show that to me and my older sister, to kind of show us, like, the message in that movie was not the kind of message everybody seems to have gotten from it, which was, the message in the movie was supposed to be like, hey, don't live this lifestyle. It's dangerous. There's some crooked people behind it. Like, don't get engaged with this stuff. Where it seems like most people took from it, if I sell drugs, I can live a flashy lifestyle.
Right. The glorification of it.
Yeah, they took the glorification of the cocaine trade in Scarface instead of seeing how he eventually devolved into a drugged out lunatic who was murdered in his house.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? By people even bigger than he was.
Right.
But like, when you look at that and you look at those kind of movies and you look at the way that stuff was projected into our communities, I wouldn't be surprised, right? I wouldn't be surprised if any of this stuff, even like what Rick, since he's on here, Freeway Ricky Ross, he said, like, they told him they got a list of all the drug distributors, and whenever it's their turn to get brought in, they get brought in, and it's just a matter of time. When you've done, just like in Superfly, when you served your purpose, they get rid of you.
Right.
And so, this is the kind of the under the surface, like you said. A lot of people within the community have talked about this. There has been a common knowledge that there has been an overt desire to destroy. I remember, man, when I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, I was in Atlanta. I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I was riding to MARTA, and I'm riding home from work, man, and I'm finished the book. I'm on my way home, so I finished the book. I'm like, man, we were on such a upward trajectory. What happened to the Black community? How do we get from this to where we are now? And this is only like 2011.
Right.
And I'm like, man, what happened? I was really like, it took me like 5 minutes to remember. I'm like, oh yeah, the government put drugs in our community.
First by heroin, and then crack heroin in the 60s and 70s. And then, crack cocaine in the 80s. You know what I mean?
And guns.
And guns,
right?
Yeah, right.
Because how are you getting these high capacity guns into like even we have said on the show, they got all these guns in Chicago. There aren't even any gun stores in the city of Chicago.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Called straw sales. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying a person can't travel, but I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying?
It's being dropped off. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, it's being in from Indiana. You know what I mean?
From Indiana, states. from the deep suburbs, from Iowa, from Wisconsin.
It's an organized thing. You know what I'm saying? It's a cottage industry of straw sales being occurring. Right? Yeah, bro. It's and if they wanted to stop it, they could stop it. But as we all know, if you can go over and create, wars out of thin air, you surely could have, ensured that, hey, they could have went to the source of where these drugs were being produced in Colombia or where, Mexico, and shut that. You have the ultimate level. I mean, we just saw what with the tariffs that Trump was putting on Mexico and Canada, right? And how quickly it was like, okay, we want to put 10,000 on the border, stop fentanyl from coming. You know what I'm saying? They couldn't have done that at any other given time. Like, get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like for real. America can go occupy Afghanistan and Iraq off of nothing. You know what I'm saying? Off of a fake trumped up charge of weapons of mass destruction. You had plenty of evidence that shit was coming. You knew that shit was coming in here. You know what I mean? But it benefited them to do so. You know what I'm saying? It's a whole industry of, now we got to, tough on crime. I mean, it was a business. There's no coincidence that this was being done in the 90s. They were talking about these record labels and media conglomerates, but buying, getting into the private prisons, and we just had 1994 Crime Act, right? That's why I'm like, any of y'all that talk, I have no love for Biden at all. He knew that shit was, what I'm saying, Biden or Clinton, like absolutely none, because they knew that they were, what I'm saying, this was all part of the plan. This was all devised. They knew they were making money. They knew first and foremost they were shipping all these jobs overseas to the 80s. So the middle America was being hollowed the F out. So this was a way for them to, to bring prisons, to get, good old Joe Bobby and, and butt fuck wherever in Indiana, Michigan, whatever. This is a government job with a pension and everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I guess even a private one, right? You know what I'm saying? Private prison. This was money, cops, you know what I'm saying? We'll get on to that. This was all, what I'm saying? Like they knew they were making, this was going to be a way for lower middle class America to get, what I'm saying, to have a way to feed itself. By increasing all, what I'm saying, on our backs all over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the same old story.
The same
where you have and the reason and I mean the tariff thing is gonna kind of feed into this, since I know we're gonna talk about that later. But like the reason why all this stuff is happening now and it's falling apart in the way that it is because at this point the system is unsustainable.
Right.
At one point in time, essentially locking out 15 to 13% of the population who produced something but did not or were not legally or even technically allowed to enjoy the benefits of what they produced, created a surplus that subsidized the middle class, and even some of the working class,
right?
Everybody else who wasn't a slave or enslaved,
right?
But as the people at the top have continued to be greedy and hoard that greed and hoard their wealth and resources,
right?
Because like I even said this, like in 07, 08, might have been 09, but I was in college and I was talking to some of my like dorm mates, like resident, they live in the same building as me. And I said, if you outsource all the jobs, who's going to be able to buy the stuff? Like that just that's an eventuality that the people who make stuff never thought about. And it's as we said, it's a situation that goes back to Reagan even, but how do you suppose that you'll continue to have all production being done offshore and overseas and still be able to have a functioning country?
Right.
And so, for me, like the UAW president supports tariffs for his industry. And I think that there are certain industries where tariffs will be beneficial because in this instance, he talks about, we got all kind of plants in this country which are not operating at full capacity because we've outsourced jobs. We could operate at full capacity and make up all the shortfalls for all these different cuts that you might have in Canada and Mexico or wherever. But the reason why ultimately tariffs can't work in this country is because you don't have the infrastructure to make up for what you're losing in the low-wage jobs that you've given to China or Vietnam or any of these other countries.
Also, you don't have the wealth, because here's at the end of the day, first and foremost, an American worker is more expensive than a Chinese worker, right?
Right.
So the price, so what is allowed to be made in America is your high-end products that you sell to rich people, right? You know what I mean? For instance, to give an example, I can talk about GM specifically because I used to work for GM. So the Chevy Trax, which is like their entry-level SUV, because they don't make cars anymore. You know, all the automakers have stopped making cars. That's why you don't have like any. You used to be able, you know, hey, the Ford Escort or you know what I'm saying, the Corsica, right? You know, these were all entry level type vehicles that were under $20,000 something dollars. You know what I'm saying? That, you know, they call them eco boxes. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's dead. That's dead as far as production here in the U.S. Right? So the Chevy Trax is made in Mexico because, you know, because again, under NAFTA and the MCA, they allow for that to occur. Okay, it could, you know, so Mexican labor is not the same as American labor, right? So when you have to pay an American worker a living wage, right, that means that vehicle is going to have to be of a certain price in order to pay that living wage and for them to make a profit. Otherwise, guess what? Like I said, the Chevy Trax again is like starting off at 21,000. I think it, you know, maxed out maybe 25, 26, right? Freaking that's made in Mexico, right? But you know what is made in here is the Silverado, the freaking Escalade. You know what I'm saying? And this is stuff for starting at, you know, so the Escalade starts off at 75. Freaking, you know what I'm saying? The doggone Silverado, maybe the work truck might be 30, 35, but you talking about the, you know, the regular LT, you talking about $55,000, go all the way up to 70, 80,000 if you get like, you know, the you know, all the bells and whistles, right? You know what I mean? These are highly and mind you, the truck segment is what is, you know what I'm saying, protected by tariffs. You know what I mean? It's protected, you know, because it's a 25% tariff of all foreign makers. You know what I'm saying? When they come, you know, so for their mid-size to, you know, full-size trucks. That's why you don't ever see no Tacomas, Hondas, you know what I'm saying, like really ever get a strong presence in this market because they already are not competitive compared to the American trucks. And that's where all of the American vehicles, American OEMs, Ford, GM, Stellantis is not American, but nonetheless, they got Ram. That's where their profit centers are in the trucks because they're protected, right, by the freaking, you know, the tariff on it. It's called the chicken tax or whatever. And Richard Wolff talks about it. But and again, so here's the thing, like, so if we did bring, it's not conceivable to bring back manufacturing in this country, you know what I mean, 100%. Especially on high-end goods or any goods, because guess what? You're going to have to give us a wage that'll sustain a worker here in the U.S. You know, even if it's Amazon, you know what I'm saying? You know, Amazon's paying $18, $19, $20. You know what I mean? So the question is like, there's not enough people to afford to be able to absorb that cost because, you know what I mean? The only reason why we're able to afford, you know, some of our living, right? Because it's just being made by overseas. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's why you can go to Walmart and get you a TCL TV for like, you know what I'm saying, under $200. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe it. I was in Sam's Club and literally it was like a 80, 90-inch TV for $800. I remember when them things was going, you know what I'm saying? It was like over $1,000 plus, you know what I'm saying? But now they're down to $800-900. Why is that? Because it's being made overseas. You know what I mean? If you try to bring that type of, you know what I'm saying? You know, an iPhone, how much an iPhone would be if American workers had to work, even if they was getting like, you know, not even like, you know, let's say $15, $16 an hour. You know what I'm saying? You know, which is still not shit in America, right? You know, because the cost of living keeps going up. You know what I mean? We wouldn't be able to afford those products because we don't have the jobs on a large scale that allow us to afford those products because all the wealth, like you just said, is being taken from the top. All the wealth is going to the top. We pretty much have hollowed out the middle class. You know what I'm saying? So you got basically, you know what I'm saying, people just paycheck to paycheck. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for, this globalization, we wouldn't be able to survive. And that's why the market went down like it did. Like, oh, they know what's up. The gig is up. You know what I'm saying?
And even like Claude said in the comments,
Right.
cheap property is dead and gone.
Could you put it back up again?
Yeah. Cheap property is dead and gone. The old days of getting the fixer-upper are gone. And then he also says housing costs and buying your own house is insane now too. And that's actually interesting. So I know a couple people who have bought houses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching a YouTube video like maybe a month or so ago, and the guy was saying like what's happening to people who are buying homes now. They're buying a home and like their mortgage payment is like tripling because the taxes that they pay on their property that was inside their bill, when they signed their contract, the property was being assessed with no house on it. And so now you got this house, and the property taxes cost more than your mortgage.
Right.
But your total mortgage include, and so I mean, and this is ultimately what I think. We're at a point in this country where it's the pyramid scheme is there aren't enough suckers that you can bring into the scheme anymore.
Right.
To keep funding the top and moving the money up, and so ultimately I think, I mean, Rapunzel says class warfare. Ultimately, you're going to have either some type of serious revolt of working people, or the country is really going to fall apart. It's going to cease to exist in any meaningful way, sincerely, within the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And I'm leaning more toward within 5,
right?
Because Claude Daly again, we're in bad shape overall right now. Hope things will change up. Yeah, and you try to be hopeful, but like when you seriously sit down and look at like what you're saying, and you think about overall, right? So money, they ship jobs to China, and what is China able to do that America can't? Which you just really illustrated. They're able to set wages and conditions at a level so low nobody can compete. It's not just a matter of production where they can produce more, but the working conditions for their citizens, the living conditions for their citizens are at a level that American people, the Western world, I'll say, cannot compete. And this is whether you like or dislike the Chinese economic or political model. This is not what I'm saying. But these people can and do work. Rapunzel says it won't get better. Sorry. Right. They can and do work for nothing. You know what I'm saying?
And the reason why they can do that. Okay, you know what? Let's go to the video. Let's go to the video, man. Okay. I'm definitely want to go to the video real quick and talks about this. This one. Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, we're gonna start. I want to say start right here.
I think what is very clear,
can you hear
is that in terms of the gravity that Trump brings to this presidency, this willingness to turn everything on its head, that might be the part where you and I think, Scott, agree that actually the situation is getting quite dire and we need to do something big to switch things up, basically. The trouble is tariffs, as you say, won't do that because it's essentially a regressive tax that's going to show up in the form of inflation, which is going to affect poor people. And they've done a very good job to convince the American people that it's only going to affect the rich. In reality, it's going to, I think, affect the poorest hardest. And what I find whenever we have this conversation about inequality is all roads lead to tax the rich. It's very simple. It's like, I love how you simplify things down. You boil it down. It's like, where did the money go? It went all the way up here into this top 1%, 0.1%. How do we get the money out? You have to tax them. It's a very simple conversation. But as you say, this is all in the realm of politics, and actually getting to that point is very difficult to do because we're still in the argument phase. We're still trying to convince people, hey, look how unequal things are. You're getting screwed in a lot of ways. So I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime. Maybe it will. But for people who are listening to this and want to think about ways that they can change things or protect themselves at an individual level, maybe you're not going to go see the greatest wealth tax that you've ever seen in the history of our society, but maybe there are things that you can do on an individual level to grow your wealth, to protect yourself, to establish economic security. And I'd love to, as we wrap up here, to hear from you what your advice would be to individual people. How do you deal with this new world?
If the Titanic's going down, what do you do at an individual level? Listen, don't get me wrong. You can try aggressively to reduce your spending. You can do everything you can to get yourself and your kids into good jobs. You can encourage them to study mathematical degrees that have good career options, and you can try and get them in. And maybe social mobility is better in the US than it is here in the UK. But I've been to the elite universities. I've been to the best jobs in the world. There ain't no kids from poor backgrounds getting in. So I'm very hesitant to turn around to your audience and tell them to try and solve things on an individual level. If we as a society are countries which try to respond to societal problems with individual solutions, then our societies will collapse as soon as they encounter a societal problem. So listen, I'm not going to tell anybody, don't work hard, don't try to make money, don't try to save, don't try to protect your family. But I'm going to try to encourage people to protect their class, to protect their community, to protect their society. And that does mean you have to be prepared to work together to prevent disasters and to prevent catastrophes.
About 80% of our listeners are male, and a lot of them are young people who I think feel they're smart, maybe certification, they work hard. They feel really frustrated by some of the dynamics you've outlined. In America, for the first time in our history, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. And it's just very upsetting for them. We have the most anxious, depressed, obese generation in history. What advice would you give to your younger self or to some of the young people listening to this podcast?
The message that I think I would like most to deliver to young men in America and the UK is I want them to understand that we have really significantly reduced social mobility. The reason I want them to understand that is because I think we still send a message to young men that success is about how hard you work and what you put in, when the reality is, and I know people might not like to hear this, the truth is success is like 85, 90% who your dad is now. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth. The reason I want people to know that is not because I want them to give up and not work hard, but because the reality is if you come from a poor background, it is very, very difficult to even be able to buy a home and afford a family. And I want people to know that because I want young men to go out there, work their hardest, and recognize that if they are able to buy a house and support a family from a poor or ordinary background, they are doing really well. They are doing really, really, really well, because I think this message that tells young people you are what you make, you get out what you put in, and then gives all the money and all the wealth to people from rich families who then go and post it on Instagram, is making our young men feel like absolute shit. It's making our young men feel like, and we're lying to them. Listen, the truth is we've kind of broken society now. And if you come from a poor background, it's almost impossible for you to ever be rich. But it is possible for you to have a family, protect that family, support that family, and live a dignified life where you are proud of yourself and what you achieve. So what I want young people to realize is, yes, social mobility has been destroyed. And yes, if you are from a poor background, that makes it maybe impossible for you to get rich. But that doesn't mean your life is over. There are important things that you can achieve, that you can do for yourself and your family and for the people you care about.
Gary Stevenson is a YouTuber.
Yeah, I mean, but for how long, bro? like, honestly, you know what I'm saying? Like, if shit is going up, you know what I'm saying? Like, motherfuckers can't even afford a house, let alone you talking about if you can afford a house. Like that's just out of the realm for a lot of people, man. Like, that's not even a possibility, bro. You know what I mean? I mean, like that's where it's coming to. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that even is becoming a freaking pipe dream, dog. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing. Like, what I'm saying, we're getting to this, like they say, like at an inflection point or whatever. You know, in society where, I don't know. There was a meme. It's a meme. It said, "I really hate living through a historical event or something." It was, you know, but like it's like you.
Yeah.
Trevor is hilarious
I
today.
know, man. Playing BTS.
But like honestly, where do you go? Right? I mean, really all the guests had to say, you know, as far as encouraging words was like, hey, you know, you'll never be anything big or whatever. It's going to be terrible forever, but take pride in the fact that you continue to fight, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's essentially it.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Like, on one hand, I say it's great that Trump is trying something. On the other hand, it's like, but why are you doing it in such a ham-fisted way? You know what I'm saying? Like,
make his people rich, man. Like honestly,
well, yes.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they said that, like, I was watching something, and I got time to look it back up. But ultimately, right, they knew, like, Trump knew, like, it got out when Trump decided to pause on those tariffs, right?
Right.
Somebody made like some bunch of money, you know what I mean? You know, with the stock options and call puts, right? You know, they shortened a lot of stocks, and it only made sense that they would do this if they knew for sure that the market was going to jump up really fast. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
To cover their calls and puts. You know what I mean? That they had when they were shorting these stocks, like, because the freaking, I think it was like when he said that he was going to pause the tariffs for 90 days, like, the stock market went up almost more than it had since like a long period of time.
Yeah, it was like since 08 or
right,
it was like 08 or something crazy.
It was some crazy number, man. You know what I mean? And so they were like, you know, was this insider trading? Like, had to be. There's no other way possible, because nobody would have made that bet. You know what I mean? You know, they would have, you know, end up having to pay out if it didn't go the way that it did. So it had to have been insider trading. You know what I mean? And is anybody going to be found guilty of it? Is going to be any real investigation? We all know no. You know what I'm saying?
That's what somebody was saying. Like, well, let's have. I think Cory Booker was saying we should have an investigation, and I fully support that. So investigate everybody in Congress, right? Because Nancy Pelosi has continually out-earned the S&P 500. Like, I think her return on investments is like 80% or something, something ridiculous like that. And so, yeah, and I mean, that's even for me. You know, when you look at the stock market, so Claude, you know, he says I ain't never bought a stock or a Bitcoin, all the stories, but not smart enough to be gambling on the stock market. And that's the majority of Americans don't own. I think 80% of stock is owned by like the 1% or the 10%. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So you know, when you look at these numbers shifting on CNBC or on the stock ticker or whatever, the majority of it doesn't affect us in a tangible way, you know, on a daily basis. It might have some effect on the corporations we work for or something, you know, if you are lucky enough to have a pension fund or something. But that's the thing about it. For a lot of us, we don't have it. Let's see what Trevor says again. We need.
Where is hair?
Yeah, well, yeah, man. I don't know. Even with him, like, I think he was the one who was saying we need to investigate whether insider trading occurred. So, yeah, right? Because I want to know, you know, how do you get to be a millionaire, 100 millionaire on a job where you make, you know, $175,000 a year? Yeah. How do you have an opportunity to sit on a board or sit on not a board, but you sit on a committee in Congress that makes decisions about energy or something like that, and then you buy and sell Tesla stock at the appropriate times to capitalize off of those federal the federal rebates for clean energy vehicles or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So investigate all of them. 100% investigate all of them. But this is the thing, you know, as I said earlier today, and I've said in the past, my only issue is that we have this idea that Trump is like the worst possible thing ever occur. And so when you have people who have memories or who don't see that in their, regular working people who may not see it that way, it makes it difficult to have a constructive and meaningful conversation about how things could be better.
Right.
Because you lost credibility.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But you want to watch
let's get man. I got he talking about who? Trump or
he talking about Cory Booker.
Cory Booker. All right, yeah, man. So I'm with 2 more clips and I gotta call it quits, bro. Let me see here. I watched all 3 hours of this on Sunday, man. This was a great
convey here that we are seeing people behave. Canada is an ally, has always been. Mexico, basically, also subordinate allies. Why would you turn on them? Why would you insult them? Call the president of the prime minister of their country governor, as if he were the head of a state. Say such a thing. Why are you telling the Greenland, the people of Denmark, I'm going to take it. I want it. I'm going to take it. What would you do? What is that? That's the behavior of a drowning person who grabs hold of your swimming trunks because it's just trying to save him. You don't mean to pull off your pants. It's just the way it works. That's a little bit of what I'm thinking. And I can tell you that more and more of the world is looking at the United States now. And I've not seen this before in my lifetime here. Born in Ohio, lived and worked here all my life. The United States is a rogue country. The United States is the country to which the rest of the world looks, what the hell is going on there? You know how the United States tried to pay to portray the head of North Korea, a country nobody knows anything about. Right? He's crazy. He's a little fat man, and he's bizarre. That's how the world is looking at Mr. Trump and the United States. In that moment, Donald Trump says, I'm going to take back the Panama Canal. I'm going to take Greenland away from Denmark. I'm going to take Canada away from the Canadian. What? Here's a wonderful Hegelian irony. Coming out of World War II, a thinker of that time who was very important, named George Kennan, I believe he's credited with the phrase that American foreign policy has now to be focused on, and that came the key word, containment. And the containment had to do with the Soviet Union. You had to contain this communism. Because after World War II, now there was that cordon of countries of Eastern Europe, the Warsaw Pact, Poland in the north to Bulgaria in the south, a buffer zone of sorts before you got to Russia proper. So it had spread because those were all communist things. And so we had to contain. That's why there's the ring of bases. If you ever look at American foreign military bases, they're literally a ring around Russia. Russia's the largest country by geography in the world. And so it's quite a ring you have to put. We were going to contain Russia. And the policy was to line everybody else into this containment. NATO was conceived as a mechanism of containment. It was the way the United States would link and mobilize Europe, or at least Western Europe, to contain Russia. The irony is the project to contain has become its opposite. It's we who are becoming isolated. We who are becoming contained, not by a ring of bases, although that may come at this point, but by a ring of alliances and coalitions for which the United States is the enemy. recent votes in the United Nations, if you take a look, it's more and more isolated. It's the United States, Israel, and the Tobago Islands. That's more or less how it goes. Right? We're alone. We're alone. Coalition of the willing. It's a joke. There was no coalition on paper, yes. So it was 200,000 American troops in Southeast Asia and 11 French paratroopers, and 12 British. It's silly. But the silliness now is becoming almost perverse. The Europeans feel they've been turned on, and they are. The United States is alone. It's even turned on its neighbors. The heads of Mexico, Scheinbaum, and
Yeah, so this goes to the point of the title of the video, right? About that, the jig is up, bro. We are not. Yeah, definitely morally they know that's been gone for a while, and it's just even becoming more and more evident as different things are being exposed or what have you. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier in the video. I thought he was going to talk about where he talks about BRICS, right? And he was saying, like, if you look at BRICS and all the 11 countries that have, joined, so BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And there's like 12 or 13 more countries that have joined BRICS since the inception of BRICS.
I think Iran,
yeah, and it's like if you look at the population, America's population is only 4% of the global population with 330 million people, right, roughly. Whereas if you take those countries or whatever, that are part of BRICS, it's like 60% of the world's population. They can completely trade amongst themselves. And to whereas none of the things that we thought that we could use, like, tariffs, freaking, sanctions, like that was the big thing behind, that was the big, aha moment when we leveled every sanction that we could at Russia, behind, supporting Ukraine. And it absolutely really didn't do anything. Because why? They have one of their trading partners is China. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't produce nothing they really need. You know what I mean? Because we've chosen to outsource everything that anything manufacturing wise of any significance, we don't produce it. Agricultural wise, they don't really need it. China, it'll hurt us more by them closing out our agriculture that we do export. Like pigs, chicken, stuff like that. So, soybeans. Hey, you know what? Cool. So I'll just switch over. But guess what? Them rare earth minerals, you don't have those. You don't refine those. We do. China. You know what I'm saying? One more clip, man. I'm about to get up out of here. You know what I mean? I think he talks about, hopefully I hit it. You know what I mean? Like I said, I read it on Sunday. But this one, I believe, does China represent a new breed of capitalism? Yep.
In that scenario, what China is not what you said. China is a recognition, as we talked a little bit before, that capitalism needs to go through all the phases it can to survive. It adjusted the private quality of its beginnings by allowing the state to take a bigger and bigger role. It didn't do it in a straight line. The great crash of 1929 brought the government in massively to save capitalism. But in the aftermath of World War II, they pushed the government back out. That's what you and I have lived our lives in a period when they pushed the government out. In a way, Mr. Trump is the end of that period. When we push he'd bring the government back in. But here's the crucial thing for China. We've had the government minimal, early capitalism. We've had the government brought in, Keynes, the Depression, And then this thing called Scandinavian socialism, which seemed to mean a regulatory government, a taxing government, lots of social services produced by the government, but basically private capitalism for the bulk of the goods and services in the society. So that's another form. Then we had the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union called itself socialist, like the Scandinavians do, but they meant something very different. They meant the government takes over and runs the enterprise. And they said that was socialism. But I would argue, as you've heard me, I think, before, that it isn't. It wasn't socialism. I don't dispute. You can call it whatever you want. But they never changed the employer-employee structure of enterprises. Small group of people, the owner, the director, the board of directors, whatever you want to call it, overseeing and ordering about a mass of workers who are employees. They have very little power. They have all the power. These people fire those, not the other way around. These people direct those, not the other way around. These people produce a surplus that they get, not the other way around. In other words, this is a highly structured arrangement. For me, that's capitalism. And that was there when capitalism was small and had a few workers, and it's there with a major corporation today. It's there whether the private people do it or whether the government does it. So for me, we're still working out all the ways you can have capitalism if you understand it as the employer-employee relationship in production. Then China is simply the latest experiment in yet another form. It's not private capitalism, where you might take the example Britain and the United States. It's not the Soviet Union, no private capitalism, all government does everything. The in-between, Scandinavian, with a little government and mostly private. And now the Chinese, 50-50, with a super powerful state and Communist Party on top. That's a wrinkle. But that wrinkle has been more productive in a shorter amount of time than any of the others. Just like the absolute monarchies were the most effective, spectacular achievements of feudalism. So I'm not surprised. I think the reason China is ahead is it figured out that form of capitalism, which could get it out of poverty, which was its number one goal. 100 years of humiliation of China, was it because it was poor, backward technologically, underdeveloped, like the whole global South, like all of Africa, like most of Asia, like most of Latin America. The name of the game for them was, above all else, not the struggle of capitalism and socialism. The leaders were worried about that. For the mass of people, how to get out of my poverty, all that meant, and begin to live life. The Chinese Communist Party understood that, in part because of their differences with the Soviet Union stuff that we talked about. And they understood that's the way we're going to try to do it. With all the risks, all the possibilities of failure, we're going to do a hybrid of 50. We're going to let the private go under our control. Meanwhile, keep our control by having half the economy right under our that's how we're going to do it. And at this moment, the year 2025, there is no contest anymore. They look at it this way. Europe had 500 years to get ready to compete with the United States. They failed. All the hot technology in the world today comes from the United States or China. Europe, nothing. Look, there's no comparable Apple or Microsoft or BYD. BYD, the electric Chinese, they're on the roads of Europe because they don't have a 100% tariff. We do. So
100%.
100%. Mr. Trump put it up to 27.5%, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So if you want to buy a BYD electric car, best in the world, cheapest in the world, $30,000, get a car. But that's what it'll cost. They'll ship you a car from China. They ship all over the world. I mean, all of that's taken care of. They're a very, very big and powerful company. By the way, there's an American who has a big piece of it, owns a big piece of BYD. His name is Warren Buffett.
I end on that one, man.
Glad you didn't leave us with the cliffhanger.
yeah, and it was funny because this video was this one right here that I watched earlier today. Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett has been acting strange lately.
He's been selling a lot of his stocks or what have you. They're like, "Yo, Warren's selling stocks." Something.
He said it's something. He said if something is, I gotta try to find the clip. I'll send it to you. But it's like he said if something is at 100%, like debt to something profit or something is at 100%, he sells, and it's like at 200%.
Right. They talk about in this one, they say, it's price earnings. Like if the price earnings of the stock, like if you're not like, no matter what the price of the stock, that's could be speculation. People will be driving up the stock or whatever, just, because, of a fear or whatever the case may be. The question is, how much is the stock earning? You know what I mean? And once it gets to a certain point where, the price doesn't equate to the earnings, he lets it go. You know what I mean? He sells because he knows it's it's mainly speculation. The company behind the stock is not worth what everyone else thinks it is. You know what I mean? Especially if it's not enough earnings. He's like, so anyway, it's a good video. But and y'all can check it out if you want to. There it is. Warren Buffett just issued a bizarre market crash warning. Ultimately, man, what I feel like what the Chinese have that us as a country doesn't have. First and foremost, they have thousands of years of history. Second, I believe that because there's many different types of Chinese, and let's make like I don't want to think that I don't know that, but they're much more in tight and include and with each other than not. And also, there's an idea that, hey, we're going to do what's the best for, the people in general, and they have and plus, because they don't have to, fight, as far as politically. And that's what he was making the fact with, as far as talking about absolute monarchies, right? They have a one-party system. There is no multiple party system, right? Things can be executed and done way quicker, way faster, because all that minutia of, getting this done, passing this here, there, it takes years for us to build a brand new airport. You know what I mean? China can get it done like that. You know what I'm saying? Because hey, they can clear the regulations. It's not all these big, large forms of all these local, state, federal, different entities fighting with each other over whatever, I'm saying? Everybody having their own piece of the pie, you know what I'm saying? They're able to march and that's why, I'll never forget, like in the army, they say, hey, we protect he's like, listen, we protect democracy, but it ain't a democracy up in here. You know what I'm saying? like you gotta have structure, top down, you know what I mean? Like, we can't run like a democracy and everybody gets to have a choice on what we want to do today and all of that. It's inefficient. You know what I'm saying? It's inefficient or what have you. But ultimately, I feel like that's what they've been able to do. Of course, there's mega rich people in China. But all in all, what they've been able to pull their even their lowest level citizen has a certain, standard of living, right? And that's why, they have enough social nets, in the government to where, not all, yes, there are millionaires, billionaires, people on the top. There's obviously going to be a strata, but there's not all the, it's not they get everything and nobody gets barely anything. And that's pretty much how it's coming down here, because the time everybody idealized in America is the 40s and 50s, right? Well, mainly the 50s. The 50s and 60s are supposed to be our golden time in America when we were at our best. And if you understand, at that point in time, the top of the freaking the marginal tax rate, right, was like 90-something%. You know what I mean? So as you earn, what that basically means is as you earn more, the government takes more of what you earn, right? So right. So the top marginal rate right now, I want to say, is like 34, 36 maybe. But at one point in time, it was nice. So I mean, it's like at a certain level, let's say it was like, hey, if you earn over $80,000, let's just give an example, right? We're going any dollar over 85, let's say 85 to 95, we take in, 60%. You know what I'm saying? So that means of that dollar you earned over of that dollar you earned over 85,000, right? You know what I mean? We take, what I'm saying, we'll give you 60, you're going to get 40. So you get 60 cents, we get 40 cents. You know what I'm saying? And then at the top rate, it was like 90. But either so, ultimately what that ended up doing is like it went back into the commonwealth of the country, the schools, the roads, you know what I'm saying? And only when they started having to allow us, this is my thing, how racist this country is. Only when they had to start allowing black people to start participating, and they, because we fought the civil rights movement, that's when all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? Look, it was the 70s, right? Look at it. Civil rights bill passed 64, voting rights in 65, housing in 68, and then all of a sudden you start seeing pullback from government, right? Private schools, pulling all the kids out of private schools, right? All of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? We start, pushing jobs over. It started in the 70s. You know what I mean?
I got a book about that.
Destroying unions, right?
Yeah.
All the things going into public, all the things, all of the money that was going into the public good, right? You started seeing it start to fall back in 70s, 80s, 90s, you know what I'm saying? Because now they had to allow us to participate. No more separation, you know what I mean? And to me, their own racism has caused this overall. You know what I'm saying? In my opinion, you know what I mean? Their own racism and greed has caused this country to be in the shatters that it is, and to the point to where it's really no turning back, because you can't get all that manufacturing and turn us from a service economy, consumption economy, into a producer economy overnight. It's going to take that long for us to. It took as long as it took for it to go to this point. It's going to take that to return us to that point. You know what I mean? And then with the age of automation and everything like that, bro, it's over with. So the only way you could is by taxing these countries, right? I'm taxing these companies. Somebody talk about, see, the tariff the person pays, but you could easily just tax the companies that are freaking that's bringing the guns over here. You could just, you know what I'm saying? You could just, you could cause them a penalty to where they would incentivize them to bring the stuff over. They pay for, having their supply chains overseas versus the consumer pays, right? If you really wanted, if Trump was really about that life and saying, hey, we need this or whatever to freaking, restabilize our economy, and we need to have, certain key sectors need to be here in the United States or whatever, then you freaking either one or two, you freaking you give an incentive to the companies to do so, or you penalize the ones that don't. You know what I mean? And that way, or what have you. So, so to me, this tariff thing is just, again, Professor Wolf talked about, it's like a Hail Mary, bro. They just like, hey, we just throwing it out there, seeing these. First and foremost, Trump's an idiot. That's very clear. And I think the people behind him are idiots. They just yes men. That's why they're there. Because anybody with any real, integrity, expertise, and forethought would not be giving him the advice that they're giving. You can't be the smartest man in the room with Trump, because he's gonna kick you the fuck out. You know what I mean? So that's why the world's, like you said, the world's looking at this like, wow, really? That's why the bond market failed. Like, you know what I'm saying? They thought normally when the stock market goes bad, the bond market goes good. Because people take money out the stock. They say, okay, the stocks, the companies, this stocks or companies are going to go bad. At least we can go get guaranteed money from the United States through treasury bonds and through the bond market. And guess what? Nobody was buying. And that's when he paused. You know what I'm saying? He paused on that tariff shit because the bond market was hurting. You know what I mean? Normally, when there's a demand for bonds, then guess what? Yields go down. Because there's so much demand, and I don't have to, you know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna get, you know what I'm saying, the government and whoever issue our bonds, companies or whatever, they don't have to pay as much as everybody trying to buy bonds. I don't have to increase the yield or the interest rate to get them to buy it. You know what I mean? If you fight, just like with things, it's supply and demand. You know what I mean? So, but the problem is that the bond market nobody was buying. Nobody was buying. In fact, they were selling. And when you have to sell the bonds, guess what you got to do? Offer a higher interest rate, on the bonds. And that's, you know what I mean? And so we could have been, in a credit crash, right, in this country. You know what I'm saying? That's why he had to do it. These motherfuckers don't know what the fuck they're doing, dog, at all.
You know what I think? I think they do know. I think they do know, but the biggest issue is they don't really want to do what will work. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, like on not the show Professor Wolf, but the other one.
The other one, Professor G. Yeah.
If you're not taxing the people at the top in some way, you're not. There's no money anywhere else.
Right.
You cannot get water from a stone. You know what I'm saying? Or blood from a stone, whatever the expression is.
Right.
But even like what you said, because people would, you hear a lot of conservatives say that, Kennedy even supported tax cuts, but it's like, yeah, he supported the top rate tax cut going to 70% from 90%.
Right.
He didn't support the top tax rate being 25%.
Right.
Which is, what we see now. The effective tax rate for the top 1% is like 25%. And so we're in a situation where it's an attempt to paper over an issue with a new type of bandage or a new type of wallpaper, right? And so ultimately, like I said, within the next 5 to 10 years, more likely 5, inside of 5, this country will no longer exist. Because simultaneously, you have no capacity for production here. And then, you are making it difficult to receive goods. But even if things were to continue on the trajectory that they're going on, I still would give it to 10 years because you don't have the opportunity for upward mobility. Home ownership is unattainable. Getting a degree is not a viable path toward security, financial security.
Right.
They talk a lot about trade schools and stuff, and I think that's really a good thing now. But the amount of people that are doing it long term, I think is going to oversaturate the market. I think right now getting it,
you still need capital investment. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you got to be building a lot for you can employ a good amount of people for that to happen. If there's no projects going on, if there's no new buildings are being built, no skyscrapers being built, no new office space, you know what I'm saying? No real big increases in housing in housing or whatever, which we don't see, right? That requires some sort of either government intervention or a huge a lot from the private sector, right? You know what I'm saying? And with all these, prices are going all crazy and everything. Like, why would any company decide like, oh yeah, I'm gonna build a plant, you know what I mean? Or I'm gonna hire a bunch of workers or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem with being overly saturated in service. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. The jobs that we have don't give us the income to where we can even consume anymore. We can, you know what I'm saying? We could do this low level, you know what I'm saying, TVs and cars that now you gotta finance a new car for damn near 7-8 years. You know what I'm saying? Like there's not enough wealth because they've taken all the wealth and give it to them. Instead of there's no been any real wage increases, right? So there's no pensions, there's no real good health care, you know what I'm saying? Like, things are costing more and more and more every other day.
and it's only going to, and the trend only goes up. It only goes up, and people are at the max now. So imagine, and you know what I'm saying, in 20 years, they say it takes about 20 years for the cost of things to double. So imagine like people are paying rents right now, and you know, in the Michigan area, what, 1,500 is average maybe. So imagine in 20 years it's 3,000. Are wages increasing that much? No, that could be able to help. No, man. So that's the problem, is that they're not, you know what I'm saying? They're not paying nothing. You know what I mean? And which in turn, you know, it's a cycle. It's a freaking cycle. At the end of the day, like you were saying, if you send all the jobs somewhere everywhere else, you know what I mean? Who's going to be able to afford? You know, and they've been able to do it for a long time off of credit and cheap goods, but that's just running out. You know.
Yeah.
But all right then, man.
Hey, look. Well, on that cheerful note,
right.
we're gonna peace out, folks.
Yeah, we're gonna peace out.
This is the Freedmen's Collective. Sorry it was so long in between shows. We really were trying to, but our schedules are just kind of crazy. Hopefully, we can get back and either do one next Wednesday or another one soon.
I'm definitely gonna try to dedicate towards Wednesdays, man. Going forward.
Okay. And I think this was a good episode. You know, I think we covered all the topics we wanted to. I think we went into good detail. Had some good engagement from the chat. Just nice change. Yeah. So, okay, folks, from Conspiracy Brother and JBL, peace out.